To piggyback off my last beginner tip video, which was how shooting exclusively in black and white can help train your eyes to see highlights and shadows better, I want to add a new one to the mix, and this one helped me to understand framing and composition immensely. Many beginners like myself at the time may start their photographic journey with a photography kit, and those usually include the camera, some batteries, and some sort of a zoom lens, which are generally not the greatest, but they are technically good in the sense that they do offer a wide variety of focal lengths that a budding photographer may want to use. Unfortunately, I believe zoom lenses can hinder a beginner's photographic growth. The reason for that is because it provides just way too many options. I would compare it to trying an entirely new cuisine and trying to pick an item from a very big menu in a language that you can't understand. So for learning photography, I would always recommend picking a focal length and sticking with it until you can start seeing and framing the world in that particular focal length. Now, if you don't have a lens yet, I would recommend picking up a prime lens. A prime lens is basically just a lens that doesn't zoom, and they are generally cheaper, better performing, and much smaller than a zoom lens. If you already have a kit lens, that's fine. Just pick a focal length somewhere in the zoom range and lock it in somehow. I mean, don't glue it or anything, but always try to shoot at that zoom level. Now, I'm eventually going to make a free beginner photography course, which will include how to pick and acquire a lens. So I'm not going to go into that in this video. However, there are 3 focal lengths that I think are best for beginners, as they are generally super versatile and pretty easy to get along with. And those focal lengths are 28mm, 35mm, and 50mm. Now, the 28mm is a focal length that is a favorite for many street photographers because it is very wide and can bring a lot of the surrounding elements into the frame. The 28 is also good if you are someone who likes taking pictures indoors or prefers pictures with lots of elements in the scene. What the 28mm is not great at is isolating subjects because it has a pretty limited reach. So if you wish to isolate your subject, you will likely need to get very close to it, depending on the size of the subject, I guess. Now let's move to the 35mm. If you're not sure what focal length to get, honestly, I get this one. With the 35mm, you're zoomed in a little bit more than the 28, which means you'll have an easier time isolating subjects. Many portrait and wedding photographers love the 35mm, as you can move back to grab a lot of the scene, or get some pretty nice subject separation once you move close enough to your subject. So it's a very versatile focal length. The downside to the 35 is that it can sometimes be a little bit more expensive than the 50mm, which is also my personal favorite. And the reason why I love it so much is it has around the same zoom level as what your eyes see. So framing things in your imagination becomes very easy. The great thing about the 50mm is that it also does a really good job of isolating your subject, which is why it is the portrait lens of choice for many photographers. Street photographers also love this focal length, but they are generally the kind of street photographers who enjoy capturing and isolating distinct subjects rather than scenes with a lot going on. 50mm are also generally the cheapest lenses to pick up, as most companies offer something called a nifty 50. The downside to a 50mm is that they're not amazing indoors. You'll often find yourself backed up to a wall indoors, wishing the damn wall wasn't in the way. So keep that in mind. Now, if you are shooting on a crop sensor camera, you will need to divide those focal lengths by around 1.5 times. So for a 28mm lens, you want to look for a lens that's around 18mm. For a 35mm, you want to pick a lens that's around 23mm. And for 50mm, you want to pick a lens that's around 35mm. I know this is a bit confusing, but here's the gist. When we are talking about focal length, we are referencing the old 35mm film days. A full frame sensor is roughly the same size as a single frame of film, and that's no accident. Crop sensor cameras, on the other hand, have smaller sensors, which makes them appear more zoomed in when you use the same lens. To achieve the same focal length as a full frame camera, you will need to pick a lens that's about 1.5 times wider. I hope that makes sense. Now for the exercise. Once you've landed on a particular focal length and figured out what lens to get, the goal now is to just shoot as much as possible in a variety of lighting conditions. Once we've taken a bunch of photos, the goal now is just to put them on a computer or laptop, somewhere where we can easily study the images. So pick a photo, and then we're going to ask ourselves some questions. What was I trying to achieve with this photo? Do I have too much or too little going on in the frame? What could I have done to draw more attention to or emphasize the subject through framing? If I were to shoot the same photo again, how would I frame it differently? You see, when I first started off, I ended up shooting everything way too wide, which made my photos feel confusing, so in Lightroom, I ended up having to crop the hell out of the images afterwards. So if you go through those images and ask yourself those questions, it will totally help you being able to see your framing better in the moment. And with enough practice, you'll eventually be able to calibrate your eyes to that focal length and start framing your scene before your eyes even touch the camera. And this newfound skill will help you start seeing the world as frames, which is so much more practical and useful than walking around aimlessly doing this with your zoom lens. Anyways, I hope that the 3 beginners watching this did find it helpful or useful. If you're a pro here, hello. Thanks for watching to the end anyways. And I do want to make some more content-based videos moving forward, but unfortunately it's minus 30 Celsius and blowing very hard outside, which for all intents and purposes feels like the surface of the moon. So in the spring or summer, I'll do some more of those. In the meantime, I'll catch you guys in another video.